Hello everyone. Nick Marshall is a man in his prime, enjoying a successful career and plenty of attention from women. However, if he truly understood what women thought about him, he might not be as content. Nick often exhibits chauvinistic tendencies and rarely reflects on his actions or behavior. Despite this, he is presented with an opportunity to view himself from a new and different perspective. Nick is granted a special ability that he first perceives as a burden. One morning, he wakes up to discover that he has the power to hear the thoughts of every single woman. Nick Marshall was born and raised in the vibrant city of Las Vegas, where his mother was employed in a cabaret show. The young boy spent most of his time behind the scenes, where he was surrounded by an abundance of female affection and love. Since his own father was absent, the male role models in Nick's surroundings were the men who frequented the cabaret. He didn't show much respect towards his bosses. Nick has matured, yet his life remains largely unchanged. Every night, he is with a different attractive woman, and by day, he is employed at an advertising agency, where he markets products using images of women in lingerie. He arrives at work later than his peers, and his co-workers perceive him as a pampered, oversized child, despite his undeniable charm. This is also true for his ex-wife, with whom Nick shares a teenage daughter. Nick wakes up after a particularly rough night. The maid is tidying up, and Nick brazenly spanks her. On his way to work, he flirts with every girl he comes across. At the cafe, he once again asks a barista, Lola, out on a date, as he has done many times before. When Nick arrives at the office, he becomes the center of attention because everyone is anticipating his promotion to the agency's new creative director, Will. But his boss soon informs him that the world has changed and that advertising should now appeal more to women. Nick's area of specialization is not suited to this goal, so he invites Darcy McGuire to take over the reins in Nick's place. Feeling frustrated, Nick decides to go to his ex-wife's wedding. After the wedding, she departs for her honeymoon, leaving Nick to take care of their daughter Alexandra for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, he isn't very good at being a father to her. Now, Alexa will be staying with her dad, which means her romantic life has to pause. The evening is reserved for a father-daughter date, and afterward, Nick returns to his job. Darcy is already there. She introduces herself to everyone and talks about the huge profits of the companies that have started advertising products for women. Nick is jealous of her, as she has taken his job and doesn't take the meeting seriously. Darcy ends the meeting by giving each employee a box of women's products so they can better understand what they now have to promote. Nick rolls his eyes, yet when he arrives home, he makes up his mind to try out the female products. The year is 2001. When Nick is already dressed in tights and experimenting with a bra, Alex arrives home with her boyfriend. The uncomfortable situation quickly turns into a heated argument. Alex has been upset with her father for a long time, as he hasn't been involved in her life, choosing instead to pursue other women. Nick feels frustrated and briefly ponders over the question of what women truly desire. However, in a sudden turn of events, he slips and falls into the bathtub with the hairdryer still on. He barely manages to leap out of the water, but he still gets a shock and lands face down on the floor. The following morning, he is discovered by the housemaid, who is taken aback by the things scattered around him and confronts Nick, as she usually does. He responds to her, but the woman is quite astonished to hear this because she hasn't uttered a single word. Nick heads to work and starts to suspect something is amiss as he hears increasingly strange remarks from his surroundings. Colleagues listen. He is attacked from all sides by the loud thoughts of the women, who have no idea that Nick can now read them like an open book. Naturally, Nick is terrified of his new gift, and among other voices, he hears the unusual thoughts of a colleague named Aaron, whom he never realized he had. Oh God, created. The smiles of his colleagues, which he once thought were flirtatious, now seem to hide accusations of sleaze and chauvinism. Nick starts to panic and looks desperately for the phone number of a fortune teller, hoping to remove the curse. He confides in his friend, claiming he can read women's minds, but his friend is skeptical and doesn't believe him. They attend a meeting with Darcy, who requests their ideas after they've experimented with women's products. Nick is at a loss and has nothing to present, so he resorts to stealing his colleagues' thoughts by speaking them aloud right in front of them. The experiment was unsuccessful because the thoughts were very personal in the year 2001, and the women felt uneasy about sharing them in public. When Nick returns home that evening, he notices his daughter on the couch with her boyfriend, once again arguing with her. Alexandra's thoughts harm her father's ego. Feeling frustrated, Alex departs from the house, and Nick attempts to piece together the events of the night before to eliminate everything causing him distress. He steps out onto the balcony, into the heavy rain, and switches on his hairdryer for another jolt of electricity. The next morning, he believes his plan has succeeded, but soon enough, his ability comes back. Nick hurries to an appointment with a psychoanalyst, sharing with her the events that occurred to him. He demonstrates that he can read her thoughts and expresses his desire to be free of this gift. However, the woman cannot comprehend why Nick should not utilize such a special gift for a positive purpose. Nick concurs and decides to use his talent to enhance his skills in seduction. Eventually, Lola gives in to his allure, while Darcy starts to recognize him as a valuable asset to the company, as his ideas align perfectly with her vision for the company. Then, the boss enters, and Nick bombards him with a series of ideas that he has just taken from Darcy, before she even has the opportunity to present them herself. Afterward, Nick receives a call from his daughter and pretends that they have a wonderful relationship, all to impress Darcy even more. In 2001, Darcy gives Nick some friendly advice, suggesting he buy a nice dress for Alex's upcoming prom. Nick follows through and discovers that his plan works like magic. That same evening, Nick surprises his daughter with an unexpected offer to go shopping, based on Darcy's advice, and later, he goes out with Lola. She invites him over to her house, where Nick finds out that mind reading is a great way to please girls. Lola is thrilled and explains that she has never understood anyone so well without words. Nick continues to visit various places where women spend a lot of time, studying their thoughts and behavior. He also continues to steal Darcy's ideas and pitch them to his boss before she does. All his colleagues have also changed their attitude towards Nick, who no longer makes raunchy jokes and gives valuable advice about relationships with men. Darcy gradually begins to fall in love with him. Nick spends more time with Darcy, and it is no longer clear what he is trying to achieve. Does he want to get his job back from her, or does he just want to spend more time with her? Nick and Alexandra are out shopping, picking out an outfit for the prom. Of course, Nick overhears his daughter's thoughts and finds out that she really wants to mature and become more intimate with her boyfriend. Nick, who has treated women as objects all his life, 2001 tries to keep her from acting rashly. But Alex is already too independent for that kind of talk. Besides, a single visit to the store hasn't earned Nick the respect he's squandered over the years. Alex also believes her father never had a real relationship and leaves without finishing their lunch. Upset, Nick goes home where he watches a women's show instead of the usual soccer game, which moves him to tears. Unexpectedly, he receives a call from Darcy, who is feeling lonely, and Nick invites her to a restaurant. Ends up as usual, Darcy sentences for her, and Darcy jokingly asks if he can read minds. She admits that her ex-husband couldn't stand the fact that she was always so honest, and generally few people appreciate that quality. Darcy and her ex-husband were colleagues, but soon became bitter rivals at work. Then Darcy had to choose between her family and her career. 2001, Nick responds that he appreciates Darcy's passion for work and has learned a lot from her, though he lies that he didn't want her position. They end up kissing, and as they say goodbye, Nick tells her he has never felt so good. He hears Darcy's thoughts and realizes she wants to continue the evening, but chooses to let her go alone. On the way home, he's trying to reconcile his feelings and longings when he suddenly notices Lola, who has been waiting at the entrance for hours. She is very upset that Nick didn't call her after they spent the night together and finds the situation the only possible explanation. Nick arrives feeling aroused. To avoid causing any distress to the woman, Nick goes along with her assumption and pretends she's correct. Before departing, Lola makes Nick promise that he will inform her first if his preferences and partners change. In 2001, at work, Nick attempts to reconcile with Darcy and proposes that she deliver a significant presentation to clients on her own, without his involvement. Unaware that he has taken her ideas, the woman refers to the project as Nick's baby and insists on not taking the spotlight away from him. Meanwhile, Aaron continues to be troubled by dark thoughts, which increasingly concern Nick. However, he doesn't have time to dwell on this, as the moment for the presentation has arrived. Nick performs well and successfully secures a significant contract for the company. Darcy, who is infatuated with him, rejoices in his success as if it were her own. Nick is tormented by unbearable feelings of guilt and sits down at his laptop to write Darcy a confessional email. He is interrupted by Darcy with a bottle of champagne in her hand. She wants to show Nick her apartment, which she has recently bought. Once there, they start kissing and dancing. 2001, but that doesn't lead anywhere. Besides, the apartment is still being renovated and has no furniture. In the morning, Nick rushes to work because he knows his boss is going to offer him a promotion and fire Darcy. It turns out that Darcy has beaten him to it and has already signed the termination papers. Nick convinces his boss that all the ideas are Darcy's and that he must rehire her if he wants to save the company from bankruptcy. Nick wants to have a private conversation with Darcy, but then he unexpectedly finds out that Erin is absent from work for the very first time. He starts to worry she might have harmed herself and decides to go look for her. It's raining heavily outside, and Nick struggles to locate the address. He approaches an older woman who smiles warmly and directs him correctly. Nick enters a narrow alley, and suddenly, lightning hits a transformer, causing sparks to fly toward him. After ensuring he is unharmed, the man locates the girl's house, but discovers her apartment is empty. In the bedroom, he comes across a suicide note. Fortunately, a frightened Erin, clutching a tennis racket, is right behind him, ready to defend herself from the intruder. While talking to her, Nick suddenly realizes that he can no longer hear her thoughts. It's 2001. He feels a bit shocked, yet he sighs with relief. But that's not the reason Nick is here, so he asks Erin about her plans, which he hasn't had time for. The girl feels very touched by his attention, and Nick remembers that she once applied for a job as a copywriter. He conducts a job interview right at her home and decides to promote her. After that, he quickly heads over to Darcy's house, but she doesn't open the door, avoids his calls, and just stays lying in the bath. Feeling sad, Nick goes to the bar to drown his frustrations. It is then that he receives a call from his ex-wife, who is concerned about how Alexandra's prom night is going. In the midst of all the chaos, Nick has completely forgotten about it, so he quickly tries to organize everything. When he arrives, he realizes that Alexandra is completely distraught. She's crying in the bathroom because she wasn't ready to be intimate with her boyfriend after the dance, and he immediately left her for his ex-girlfriend. Nick replies that he is very proud of his daughter for standing up for herself and withstanding the pressure. Thanks to her father's support, Alexandra calms down and feels safe again. They return home and she falls asleep while Nick continues to think about Darcy. Although it is past midnight, Nick goes to Darcy's apartment and Darcy lets Nick in. Sadly, she tells him that she is going to sell the apartment for $2,001 because she can no longer afford it. Nick tells her that she doesn't have to because he convinced her boss not to fire her. With a heavy heart, he admits that he took her ideas. Yet, the more he attempted to create problems for Darcy, the more he found himself falling in love with her. When he witnessed the determination with which Darcy gracefully accepted her defeat and concluded that Nick was more deserving of the job than she was, he realized he could no longer remain silent and be the same old bastard. Thus, with this confession, he ends up saving not just Darcy, but also his own soul. He says he's truly sorry, yet Darcy responds by pointing out that as she's been reinstated to her position, she'll be the one to fire Nick first. It's now his turn to endure it and resign in disgrace because he truly deserves it. Nick is convinced that Darcy will never forgive him and that their relationship is finished. However, she still harbors feelings for Nick, and what occurred at work isn't going to change that. Darcy truly appreciates Nick's heartfelt confession, yet she's unsure of how to respond to his genuine sincerity. Nick, filled with joy, eagerly goes back to kiss his beloved. As always, you can find the name of the movie in the description below. Meanwhile, we invite you to share in the comments how you would use the power to read the minds of the opposite sex. So says also, remember to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button to enjoy even more amazing recaps.